Hey everybody, we're playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and we are working on the Season 2 raid, so this is Episode 2 in the raid series. As soon as you get into this room, you're going to climb this ladder and jump up onto these edges here, like something out of Uncharted. And just for clarification, we are going to skip most of the firefights and the enemy engagements. We're going to focus strictly on the puzzles and any sort of teamwork interaction that's required for these raids, as is the case in all of the raids so far, since there's only been two. You do have to communicate, over-communicate with your team. They need to know what you're doing. You need to know what they're doing. You have to do this with 3 people. You can't do it with fewer. You can't do it with more than 3. So everyone needs to be talking to each other all of the time. You're going to make your way through this series of tunnels after you've gone up that ladder and up those edges. And just make sure you're anticipating what your team is doing through communication and they know what you're doing. So it's not too difficult now, but it does get extremely difficult towards the middle and the end, as was the case in the first raid in Season 1. So communication, I cannot stress it enough. You need to be able to talk to your team, not get frustrated, and just take things nice and slow. So I threw that cluster bomb there because there is a juggernaut that comes up that pathway. So you can lead him up and then into the open space where everyone can have access to him in order to shoot him, because trying to kill him down that narrow corridor is not ideal. We led him into the next room and we used this giant pillar here to just kind of hide ourselves. He's only going to aim at one person, as you know, with Juggernaut, so he has the opportunity to be exposed to the other 2 people who can shoot him. But once you've taken down that Juggernaut, there is another series of edges or ledges that you need to jump up to. I had a difficult time here, but as you can see there, once you get up here, there is a vent that's blowing out steam. You have to turn that off, so your team's going to have to do that down there. So there's a little nozzle here. One person's going to go up, someone's going to turn it off, and then someone's going to have to turn it back on, because when you turn it off on one side, it engages the other side. So 2 people can go up here while 1 person is doing this from the bottom, but there is another valve at the top there. So I've made the jump. Now I'm sitting here waiting for them to turn off this other one. As you can see, that first one is engaged and the other one is disengaged now. So once you make your way up here, 1 person is going to turn this off and on for the last person that needs to make their way up those ledges, jump over, turn off, turn on, and I've pointed down there again where the first valve is. So there's a valve on the bottom and then there's a valve on the top. This is most certainly going to be the case throughout this raid, that there are situations where 1 person is going to have to do something to interact with a valve or a lever or a button that someone else is going to then have to take advantage of, whether it turns something on, turns something off, opens a door, whatever it may be. This is why communication is super important in these raids. But once you've made your way down into the floor here, just nice and quiet is what we were aiming for. We're not running gunners, so we're taking our time with this thing. We're not going for a world record or anything like that. You're going to take out the enemies here, and this is the first of 3 different vent interactions that are going to take place. Obviously, the first one is going to be the easiest, so Dougie jumps down and immediately dies, but this is when we realized, oh, if you fall, you just spawn back. Okay, so if you fall into that pit there, you're going to respawn back at these buttons. Everyone has to push these buttons at the exact same time, so you're going to communicate that, and then 1 person on a platform at a time. If 2 people are on these platforms, it will drop and both people will fall. And if you take too long, it's on a timer, so those platforms will eventually drop too. So you have to be moving quick enough, but only 1 person on a vent platform at a time. Once you've made your way past the first one, you're going to take this rope here, you're going to send up that line and move on to the second one. Everyone's going to push the button at the same time again. Once you've done this, it's a little more difficult than the first one. You're going to jump across all of these platforms, these vent platforms in front of you, but then you actually have to make your way over to the right onto another platform and onto that yellow pipe right there. Again, we're talking about only one person on a platform at a time. The pipe, not a big deal, but you are going to have to wait just a moment because that first button that you press on the console is going to trigger these platforms all the way across. And the game gives you enough time for all 3 people to make their way up that yellow pipe before it opens the next platform. But again, just like the first one, those other platforms are going to drop. So you only have a certain amount of time. And we're doing a celebratory completion dance here because it took us quite a while. So once you've made your way through there, you're going to open these doors here and everyone regroup, move on to the next series of the raid. Moving forward, we have some enemy engagements that we're going to just blow past. All right, so you're going to drop down here and you're going to open this door here. There are some enemies on the other side of this door, but we're just going to fast forward past that, take you on through the raid series. Just from a puzzle standpoint, not an enemy engagement standpoint, it's going to be your first armory that you encounter. You can gain shields, you can gain ammo, and I would recommend a gun with a large magazine. All right, so what I ultimately ended up having at the end of it, this is the minigun that the Juggernaut dropped. I eventually ended up picking up this shotgun with Dragon Breath on it. So that was beneficial in a situation where there are enemies down a corridor space. But then I eventually also ended up picking up that RPK with a 100-round mag. And what I'm doing here is you can actually just drop your plates and refill at this refill armor here. So drop your plates, pick up more. That will store them in your backpack. Unfortunately, you can only have one shield in a slot at a time. So it's unlike Warzone and DMZ where you're actually able to store multiple shields in one slot. You can only have one shield in one slot in the raid at a time. At any rate, moving on past that, there is an enemy engagement in this area as well, but I'm showing this because there were some interactions that took place here after I got knocked down. Got to wait for somebody to come pick me up. This is where communication again is key. So Dougie's helping me up here, but in this room you have to make your way up. So you went down to go up. You have to access this zip line here and ascend up to it. And you're going to have to be taking out enemies along the way. So communicate, communicate, communicate. You're going to have conversations with your team to make sure that either you're shooting at people or they're shooting at people as you move through this space. So I'm ascending up. I have to go get Fool over here because he got knocked down and taking out enemies along the way. So I just sped through after I took down most of those enemies. Fool got himself up, and we are going to jump up this elevator shaft that appears to be an elevator shaft. And those platforms there you can latch onto, again, much like Uncharted. But you're going to take out the enemies along the way too, right? So once you've made your way this far up, there is going to be a panel on the opposite side of where I'm at that you can actually turn off and on this bit of fire that needs to be off so that people can ascend up another zip line. So just at the end over here, there is this valve. You're going to press this valve. That valve is going to turn off the fire there. And so one person is going to have to turn off this valve so that the other person can hit the zip line. Never in a situation in raid will you be able to trigger something and then go do it yourself. You always have to be communicating and working as a team. So Dougie's going to turn this off for me so I can ascend up here. And sure enough, there were some enemies here that were getting in the way of us allowing Dougie to get up here with this other trigger valve. So more enemies pop up out of there, and they are heavy duty. We're going to fast forward past some of this too, but I got knocked down once or twice here. I think we all got knocked down at some point, so we had to save each other. So once you've eliminated all of the enemies, Dougie over there, he's hitting the valve. Fool ended up down and Dougie ended up up, so we had to get the third guy, all three of us, up that zip line by turning off the fire. You're going to regroup at this button here, press that, move you on to the next part of the raid. Now there's a bit of a theme occurring here inside that room, that corridor. There seem to be quite a few instances in the raid where you actually have to take down a bunch of enemies in a long corridor. But that remains to be seen in this video. We will encounter that again. Another vent situation, another puzzle. You have to hit the button at the same time. Again, one person at a time on these vent platforms, and the person in front is actually going to end up being the person in the back. So they have to move all the way down, and then everyone is going to jump over to the right, and then the person in the back, me in this situation, ends up being the person in the front. Again, speed, one person on a platform at a time, and make sure that nobody falls, because everyone has to make it back through this thing, okay? You can work your way back up that ladder if you have to restart, but everybody has to make it through, one person on a platform at a time, fast as possible. Once you've done that, drop down in this hole. This is where it gets a little crazy. There are a lot of enemies here, and it is very difficult to see, so be very patient. Communicate, communicate, communicate. The flashlights are somewhat helpful, but it is very dark inside these hallways in this corridor, and you're actually going to end up dropping through the floor. So you'll hear your characters say something to the degree of there are 3 holes in the floor. So there's one over here, and if you wander over to the right of where I am, you'll notice another one, but there are 3 people, there are 3 holes, so each person goes down a separate hole. You're going to try to take out all of the enemies down here as quickly as possible. It does get a little chaotic, so still communicating. We're making sure that we're saving our friends and killing the enemies, all right? So another armory here, and this is where I picked up the RPK like I mentioned before. So in the first armory, I picked up that shotgun, and the second one, I'm going to end up picking up this RPK. Refill your ammo, refill your shields, move on to the next part of the raid. Now, this is actually where it gets quite tricky. I think this is the longest we spent on the raid, this one section here. First, it was difficult to sort out, to sort of decipher the puzzle here. But then it ends up just becoming even more difficult with the number of enemies that spawn inside this room and the other room. So that first console, there are 3 consoles here. All right, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there are 3 consoles here. The first one is a vent for the gas. The second one is a fan console, and the third one is a door console. So you have your vent, your fan, and your door. What needs to happen here is one person turns off the gas, the second person opens this door for you, and the third person runs this maze. Inside this maze, there are puddles on the ground with electric wires in there, so you want to avoid those. If you get hit by those too many times, you will die, all right? So once or twice, not a big deal, but you're going to make your way through this maze, and right up there you can see you can turn the fans off. So someone outside who did not run this maze is going to have to hit that fan and communicate that to the person inside, and vice versa. The person inside is going to need to tell them when to turn the fans off. Likewise, the person inside is going to actually have to tell the people on the other side, on the outside, when to open the door. So you have to empty the gas from this room, you have to open a door, you have to turn off the fan, and then you have to open the exit door. And that gets one person through this. Once that person is through this, there are the same buttons on the other side, and you run into the same problem on this side as well. Enemies will show up, all right? So I'm struggling to fight the enemies while also trying to get my team over onto this side with me. And so you're just going to communicate, right? You're going to say, hey, I need a minute. I got enemies on me. Give me a moment. Give me a moment. They will likely say the same thing. I had a sentry gun because I was recon, so that helped out a lot. But there are enemies that continue to spawn on both sides, and you have to work your way through the series of button presses to get one person through at a time. And as you can probably imagine, it's most difficult when you're solo on one side. So the first person to make it through is going to be solo on the opposite side. But on the initial side, the last person to make it through is going to be soloed. Okay, so that person's going to find it difficult, just as difficult as the first person to make it through, who ends up solo on their side. But the nice thing about both sides is not only are the buttons there, right? Because obviously you have to get your people through the gas and through this little maze here, but there's also ammo and there's also shields in these areas. So if you run out of ammo or shields, just be patient, take out the enemies around you, and go re-up and continue to move through the maze. It is certainly convenient to have one person on each side. So once one person has made it through, you can see Dougie, he's actually in the maze right now and we're talking to him. So one person's going to turn off the gas, one person's going to open the door for him. So player 1 turns off gas, player 2 opens the door, right? And then player 1 is going to turn off the fan, and then player 2 is going to open the door again. All right, so that is the way that I would recommend doing it. Player 1 is gas and fans, and then player 2 is the doors. At which point you're going to bring everybody over. Once you have everybody over, the enemies will stop. The enemies will eventually stop, slow down, and then stop, and then you can re-up on your ammo and your armor. Once that has happened, we're still working on trying to get full through this maze here. So now there are 2 people on the second side who can work together to get the third person, the last person, through the maze, through the gas, through the fan, through the doors. I really hope all of this is making sense for anyone watching, just because this took us quite a while to figure out. We had some headaches, we had some arguments about the best way to approach this, but one person is waiting to run the maze, and then there are 2 other people who are pressing the buttons. All right, so full is almost all the way through. You saw where Dougie actually turned off the fan for him, and I'm sitting here. I'm taking a chance on getting the door done, right? But I ended up getting down there, so I just fast forwarded it through because there's a lot of pickup that's occurring when enemies show up like that. Once you've gotten all 3 people through, you're going to make your way to the back of that second space where those 3 consoles were, down this hallway, and you're going to breach this door here. I don't think it's any surprise we died a few times here, and upon dying, we tried to res Dougie over there, and he actually ended up with a glitched icon on his screen, so he's up, but he's got a health bar there. Not a big deal, though. So you can re-up on your armor here again, and then there's going to be ammo at the bottom of these stairs, but you're just going to make your way down here, and this is the last little speed run that you have to make it through, okay? So this is where tons of enemies come through. I would recommend having throwables and high magazines, or I'm sorry, high ammo magazines, right? So I have this 100 round RPK. I have my shotgun for, you know, quick access if need be, and high damage, but you're just chucking your throwables. I'm going to re-up on my throwables and continue to throw those when necessary, but you're just communicating. There are some shield guys down here that you're going to need to take out, and Molotovs, shock sticks, whatever you got. The snapshots actually came in handy too. So Dougie was throwing snapshots, and me and Fool and I were throwing Molotovs like crazy. So make your way down this corridor, picking each other up where necessary, and eliminating all of the enemies. You're not going to be able to run past the enemies. You are going to want to take them out. But the awkward thing about all of this is that gas is still moving through this space. So that's why you're kind of on a timer. You're trying to move through this space as quickly as possible because the gas is coming. We want to blow up this wall here once you make it up this ladder, and then push through this next corridor. It took us a minute. We actually had to do this a couple of times because we couldn't figure out where to blast that hole. And then we noticed there was some light shining through that concrete. So the gas is still coming. Got my shotgun out at this point until I have an opportunity to reload both of my guns. But we're just pushing through this last tunnel here. And this is the very end of this raid. All right. So season 2, episode 2 raid. Moving through, making sure you're staying ahead of the gas, killing all the enemies. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Once you've pushed past these enemies, there's going to be a bunker style doorway button thing that you're going to have to interact with. So we're going to knock down the rest of these guys here, push through, make sure we're staying ahead of the gas. The gas is right on our heels. Everybody is going to climb inside here. We're going to press this button, regroup, and that'll do it. So that's the end of episode 2. I'm going to let the cinematic play, but hopefully this helps you guys out, and thanks for watching.
Clear.
All clear.
Who's broken?
One piece here.
You good, old man?
Been worse.
On you, boss. Look,
AQ.
Who shut down?
who the hell hit him?
Someone trying to stop them from doing this.
Fucking hell. Alcatala got the warhead.
Recently.
Very.
It's Alex.
Echo 3-1.
There's a lot of steel between us and you, mate.
Button, left side.
Eyes on.
Hit it.
Done.
What happened?
Had a firefight with AQ. They killed the Reef and the others.
We know. Rahmel Rahon.
Captain. Sergeant. Told you you'd have friends nearby. Man of Steel. Titanium.
Bulletproof.
From the knee down, anyway.
How are you still alive?
Their commander. He spared me.
Why?
He had a message. Wanted me to deliver it personally. To you.
To me? Who is this commander?
Farah. You're not gonna like this.
Alex. Who?
Your brother. Adir.
Adir is in jail.
Not anymore. He wants a truce. Wants to work with you. Work with us.
To do what?
To kill Russians. With their own weapons.
The warhead.
That's Hadir.
He wants us to join him. Or turn back. That's the message.